Welcome back to Jeremy Kyle Live for Tuesday night. We're investigating the serial killer Levi Bellfield. Now, he's reared his ugly head back into our newspapers recently by claiming responsibility for the unsolved murders of Lynn and Megan Russell and Elizabeth Chow. Let's just take a moment and remind ourselves about who this animal is, Levi Bellfield, and why he is rightly one of Britain's most notorious killers. If you were to look up the word monster in the dictionary, it would say a large, ugly and frightening imaginary creature. But there is nothing imaginary about this monster. A penchant for young blonde women, predator Levi Bellfield would drive the streets hunting them down.
Levi Bellfield was a predator. From his car, he stalked bus stops and late-night bus routes in West London, waiting for nightfall so the bus's lights would make it easier to identify his victim.
When detectives located a number of his ex-girlfriends, they all described the same pattern of behaviour, charming at first before turning completely controlling, and then evil.
And it was all part of the image that he liked to portray of him being a successful, influential person, but in truth he's just an extremely dangerous man.
At the time of the attacks, the father of 11 ran a wheel-clamping business in West Drayton and already racked up 9 police convictions that included burglary and the assault of a police officer. It was in October 2001 that he met his first known victim, Anna Maria Rennie, who described how she screamed and kicked before running. She has since said that the bus stop attack changed who she is. His other victims, though, were less fortunate. In March 2002, 13-year-old schoolgirl Millie Dowler vanished after getting off the train in Walton-on-Thames, close to Levi Bellfield's home.
Millie Dowler was last seen alive walking along this road near the station in Walton-on-Thames. The man who today has been charged with her kidnap and murder, Levi Bellfield, was living at the time with his girlfriend in this block of flats right next to the road.
Her body was identified via dental records after it was found dumped in Woodland just 6 months later. In February 2003, gap year student Marsha McDonnell was attacked by Bellfield whilst walking home. The 19-year-old was found bleeding to death from horrific head injuries after a night out to the cinema with her friends. She died in hospital 2 days later. It was another year before Bellfield attempted to murder the then 18-year-old Kate Sheedy by running her over after she became suspicious of him.
He ran over me. He ran over you again? Yeah. He ran over you twice? Yeah. And I'm really hurt.
She survived the ordeal after spending several weeks in hospital and later testified in court against him.
With this verdict, I can finally move on with my life and attempt to put this behind me. The scars on my body and the memories I have are something I will never be rid of.
This picture shows his next victim on a bus shortly before he bludgeoned her to death. 22-year-old Amélie Delagrange was a French student visiting the UK when she was found at Twickenham Green on an evening in August 2004. She was taken to hospital, but her head injuries were so bad that she didn't make it through the night. Bellfield was finally arrested in November 2004 and in Feb 2008 was found guilty of the murder of both Amélie Delagrange and Marsha McDonnell and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy.
After nearly 5 months of having to endure the cowardly charade of innocence put forward by the defence, we at last get to see Levi Bellfield for what he truly is.
Shockingly, it took until June 2011 for Bellfield to be found guilty of killing Millie Dowler.
At last, the man responsible for the cruel murder of our darling daughter so many years ago has been found guilty. To bury your child when you know she died in such an appallingly awful way is terrible.
On both occasions, the judge imposed a whole life order, the only prisoner in history to have received 2. It means Bellfield will rot behind bars. But the case is far from over. Police still think he is a suspect in connection with numerous unsolved murders and attacks on women dating back to 1980. Police are currently preparing to dig for the remains of a 19-year-old missing student, Elizabeth Chow, after the killer allegedly confessed to detectives that he'd hidden her body in Woodland 24 years ago.
In the confession, Bellfield describes how he came across Lynn Russell and her 2 children, how he attacked them with a hammer.
Whilst it's also been reported that Bellfield has admitted to murdering Lynn Russell and her 6-year-old daughter Megan, who were found bludgeoned to death in Kent in July 1996. Horrific. Joining me to discuss this is David Collins, a Northern editor at the Sunday Times, whose reporting helped convict Levi Bellfield for the murder of Millie Dowler. David, thanks for joining me. You embedded yourself, it's fair to say, with Bellfield's family and friends to get those interviews with him over the phone. Tell me why. Give me some background, my friend.
So this was in about 2009. I was a cub reporter. At the time, I was working at the Daily Mirror. I was doing a lot of crime reporting, and I had a contact within the criminal underworld in West London, and he would give me stories and about various things. And after a while of getting to know him and his circle, it became apparent that he was very close to Levi Bellfield. At the time, he'd already been sentenced and convicted for the murder of, as your package just said, Amelie de la Grange, Marsha McDonnell, Kate Sheedy's attempted murder. But the police always believed that he had killed Millie. And it was public knowledge that, you know, he was the prime suspect for the murder of Millie Dowler, but the police they didn't have the evidence. And I basically used this friend as a go-between for about 6 months to 8 months. This go-between introduced me to Bellfield's family, his brother, his mother, Jean, and for that period, I was basically, I just remember the smoky pool halls and kind of boozers in West London, where I was part of Bellfield's circle. Because Bellfield at the time, he wanted me to do an interview with him to say, I'm innocent. You know, I've been fitted up by the police. I didn't do anything. I didn't murder Amelie. I didn't murder Marsha. And I want you to tell the world. So I said, I'll listen to what you have to say, but I want you to talk to me about Millie. So he agreed. And I remember to this day, one afternoon, it's about sort of springtime in 2009, and I was sitting in his brother's home, and his mother was there, and he cooked me kind of meals and things, and we talk about Levi and trying to work out how on earth I was going to do this interview, because in this country, as you know, Jeremy, it's really tough for journalists to get into prisons. It's not like America, you know, it's a very closed system here. And the phone rang, and Jean, his Bellfield's mother, picked up, and they had a chat about EastEnders. I remember, you know, they were talking about Ian Beale. And then Jean hung up the phone and said, "Oh, see you later, Lee." And I said to Jean, was that Levi? And she was like, "Yeah, he rings every day on the phone here, and we have a chat." And I said, "Okay, tomorrow, what I want to happen is phone rings, and instead of you guys answering, I do." And they prepped him, and that was basically it. I did 2 interviews with him. The first interview, I remember leaving the house, and he was he's quite a charismatic figure, Bellfield. I was just describing, if people would ask me what he was like as a person, he would be the person in a pub at the end of the bar who doesn't stop talking, and he knows everybody, and you can't get a word in edgeways. And basically that's what that first interview was like. He chatted my ear off about kind of Amelie and Marsha and how he's nowhere near when it happened and everything else. And I remember leaving that interview quite disappointed. I checked my tape recorder. As a cub reporter, 26 years old, the tape didn't work. So the tape recorder of this, it hadn't worked. And then the next day, I went back and I said, "Look, I need to talk more about Millie. We've talked about what he wants to talk about. Now I want to talk about what I want to talk about." And the family agreed, and Levi agreed. And then that next interview, the second one, the crucial one, was about Millie. It was about where he was the day Millie went missing, what vehicles he had, what he was doing. He told me he was doing DIY in Shepperton at the time. He said he gave his mate his usual car, a white van. And this is where he made the mistake of his life. What he told me was he was driving his girlfriend's red Daewoo car. So that red Daewoo car was caught on CCTV, and the police had it, pulling onto Station Avenue half an hour after Millie went missing. And that is where, the same location where Millie was last seen. So that's why when he told me he was driving a red Daewoo car, and that was him in the footage driving it that day on Station Avenue, he put himself on the crime scene.
David,
on the day that Millie went missing. And that is why it was so utterly important to the police.
I could talk to you forever. There's just a few things I'd like to ask. You talk about getting to know the family, embedding yourself in their life, if you like, to gain their trust. Very briefly, they came to trust you. What was it like afterwards when the family, I don't know whether they supported him or not, if they do, they're as bad as him, realised that what you'd written put him absolutely in the frame for Millie Dowler's murder? Do you look over your shoulder? What impact does it have on you as a journalist?
I remember at the time, there's two camps with Bellfield. So his family, Jean and Richard, his brother, they were decent people. They were nice people. They were utterly convinced that Levi was innocent. So Levi, as I said, you know, he's a serial killer. He's pathological. He is psychotic. But at the same time, if you met him in a pub, he would be you'd strike you as very charismatic. He wouldn't stop talking. He's quite controlling, and he convinced his family completely that it was innocent. Afterwards, the impact was huge. Jean had very ill health after we published our interviews. Levi blamed that on me. Levi blames everything on other people. His criminal associates, that was the bit that was more difficult. I carried on investigating Millie Dowler's murder because it wasn't just Levi's interviews I was interested in. There was other things, like, for example, the police believed that he used a red Daewoo car to transport Millie's body. So I tried to find out what had happened to it, to that car. The police couldn't work it out. I had a lot of criminal informants at the time. They told me he took it to a scrap dealer, got it crushed, got rid of it. And I had the name of the gangster that took the car to the scrapyard to do the crushing. That was him and his circle were the real difficulty for me. You know, I had death threats.
I have to jump in, David.
I had a lot of things.
I don't want to, but I have to. Listen, two questions briefly. Did his criminal circle, did they threaten you? Do you to this day look over your shoulder? Briefly, yes or no, and then one other question.
Absolutely. I mean, I heard a recording once saying, "I'm going to kill David Collins and bury him next to Millie."
Wow.
You know, that was the impact on me as a 26-year-old. And I've always said those interviews, they changed Levi's life and they changed my life as well, to a certain extent. You know, it helped my career in a lot of ways as a journalist, but, you know, to a certain extent in that circle in West London, I was a marked man for a while. I don't feel at risk now. Because he's now a child killer, he's lost his friends, you know.
Final question for you. What a brave man you are, David Collins. Recent confessions, bit of Megan Russell. I'm going to throw something in. People might agree or disagree. Do you believe his recent confessions, or is Levi Bellfield somebody who puts it out there of his involvement by way of keeping his name? Is he playing a game with the police? Is his psychology? What's your opinion, David?
I would love, in my view, Bellfield confessing to anything has to be treated with extreme caution. My gut feeling is this is about a publicity-seeking attempt. Bellfield is strange, Levi's strange in that he will admit to he confesses to murders that he hasn't been convicted of, but he won't admit to the ones he has been convicted of. It's a strange thing. And Elizabeth Chow, she went missing in a part of London that was his stomping ground. It was Ealing. He used to hang around in that part of London at that time. It's possible, but I would treat it with real caution.
David, I'm going to say something to you, apart from I could talk to you for hours and hours. You are living proof that investigative journalism, when it works at its best, does absolutely the right things. And I salute you. Many years have passed, but for what you did, because he should rot in hell for all eternity. David Collins, thank you very much indeed. And next on JK Live, by the way, we continue to explore his abhorrent crimes. And after the break, we speak to someone who knew him best. I've got his ex-girlfriend, Johanna Collings, back in 3 on JK Live. Welcome back. Tuesday night, you're watching JK Live as we investigate the crimes and character of serial killer Levi Bellfield. Now, the chasm between the man Bellfield masqueraded as and the monster within is plain for all of us to see. This is a man who has 11 children with at least 3 different partners, a man who would turn up with flowers and play the perfect gentleman to win over the women in his life, and a man who, the Sun revealed, is making plans to marry a besotted admirer. Yet is in prison, let's just remind ourselves, for taking the lives of 2 young women and a 13-year-old girl. Joining me now is someone who has seen the very worst of Levi Bellfield. Delighted to have her on, ex-girlfriend Johanna Collins. Johanna, thank you for joining me. I know how difficult this is. What do you want people to know about Levi Bellfield?
Well, there's a lot you can know about him. I mean, I've said, you know, as a person, when he was being Levi, you wouldn't want a nicer person. You know, he was so kind, help anyone, talk to you about anything. But then with just a flick of a switch, he was mad, psycho.
How does he treat people that he loves? Initially great, but then does he turn? Does he flip? Your own experience?
How does he treat people? Very controlled. He controlled everything down to what you wore, you know, who you spoke to. You couldn't answer the phone without him. He either answered it or you had to have it like at an angle so he could hear what was being said.
They always say, don't they, that the archetypal control freak is the person that does a job on the person at home so that they can go and do whatever. In his case, it was horrific crimes. Others are affairs. You said something that fascinated me, Joe. You said that Levi brainwashes people. What do you mean by that?
He can convince you that, you know, and he did it to me once. He can convince you that you've had an affair and you haven't even left the house for days.
He convinced you that you'd had an affair?
Yeah. Yeah, he can. And he's so clever at how he works and what he does to you. He really gets inside your brain.
I think it's really brave of you, because people watching this would go, well, he's an abhorrent human being who should rot, as I've said, in hell for all eternity. But there's also the human side of it, not just, obviously, the victims, but you yourself are a victim. When you discovered what this man truly was, tell me what that did to you as a person, as a woman.
It's quite hard to explain, because you go from being this outgoing person that's a fun, bubbly, to you wouldn't even make eye contact with people because you wouldn't dare. Because if it was a man, say when he was at work, you'd go and pick him up and it was one of the other doormen, you wouldn't talk to them eye to eye because you'd be accused of either having an affair with them, you wanted to have an affair with them, or you were a flirt. And, you know, all these sort of, you actually end up talking like this, like looking down at the floor all the time because you were too scared to actually look at someone.
I've done this many times and talked to brave, brave women like you who find themselves in that position. Many people say that there's physical violence in domestic abuse, but actually when it's in the head, when you are convinced by this manipulative person that you are worthless, that really does a job on you psychologically, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I've been diagnosed with PTSD because of it.
Do you have any contact with him?
No, no, absolutely not.
You had 2 children with him.
Yeah, but so did other people, you know, and my kids, unfortunately, you know, they're my world, they're everything, but they've never had anything. You know, from when he left, I made sure that they had nothing to do with him.
You spoke out, didn't you, about Levi's plans to get married in prison to this besotted person. Why did that come as a moment where you felt the need to speak out, to protect her?
No, because I think it's absolutely disgusting that, A, he's having female visitors, ones that send him photographs of themselves in lingerie, kneeling on a bed with the caption, "Take me to bed, Levi," and he's got them up on his cell wall. And after what he's done to people and to those girls and all the other ones he's raped as well, and all his other victims of abuse, how dare he be allowed, when people can't feed themselves or keep their houses warm, but they'll happily let him buy a ring from somewhere and get down on one knee when they shouldn't have any form of contact. And I mean, it's clear what she is, because Peter Sutcliffe was her former pen pal. So, you know,
I've never really understood. I've seen programmes about, I'm going to say women before people jump up and down, that become obsessed with these.
Yes, they do, don't they?
And you know what? You've spoken so bravely, and you absolutely made a point about our criminal justice system, which is crap. I mean, how is that allowed to happen? He takes people's lives. He shouldn't be being able to do anything like that. Do you think the police, the authorities, Joe, are taking him seriously enough? Do they underestimate him? Because we started this by you saying that he really gets into the old brain. Do you think that a lot of
I think a lot of it with him is, I mean, he's put 2 hits out on me and I'm still here. I think with him, it's all about control. So, you know, he before said he admitted to Millie, then he retracted it. He's admitting to murders that we know he hasn't done.
Why?
So if he
Why?
Well, why can't he admit to Millie Dowler and Amélie Delagrange and Marshall McDonald? Why not admit to all of them? Why admit to murders that we know he hasn't done? It's all about controlling the situation. He's still getting his name out there. He's still playing on everyone's minds. I mean, the relatives of those families, you know, why should he be allowed to keep doing this?
I have to say, and I want to say, so brave of you to come on, and I genuinely appreciate it, and it is something that people need to hear. And actually, you know what? You say you'd look down, you should look up, and people should salute you for having the bravery to do that. Thank you so much indeed, Jo Collins, for coming on, joining me now to shed some light on the mindset that drives somebody like Bellfield. As a psychologist, a good friend of mine, Emma Kenny. Emma, what goes through somebody's mind to be like that? I thought that was really interesting, by the way. You and I have worked together before. There's an archetypal control freak. You know, I'm going to keep you in the corner with your head down, accusing you of everything because actually I'm out doing my stuff, right?
Absolutely. What she was just saying as well is absolutely correct. The fact that she was seeing him as a power control killer stroke partner, that is absolutely his mindset. He's an individual who is obsessed with controlling people, controlling a narrative. And when you are locked up, you don't really have a choice to control in the way that you would wish to dominate and control.
And so, newspaper stories, I mean, he seems to be now, and Jo Collins, his ex-girlfriend, just said it, he seems to be admitting to any murder that comes up. And I think we have to give great consideration. The Lynn and Megan Russell, you know, the man that's in jail for it, the police haven't changed their stance, the family of the victims. Bellfield sits in his prison sentence with pictures at his cell, with pictures everywhere, just giving out the whole time. Why? Is that part of the game? Is that playing everybody as well, Em?
Oh, without a doubt. He's a massive narcissist and he's got a psychopathic personality disorder. So they are perfect marriage, a combination of variables and traits that makes him want to be almost a megalomaniac in the world. The fact is, he's rotting away, as you put it, he is rotting away in his cell. Therefore, he's got to think about ways to be in control, to essentially spend money that he knows he's costing us, because that's what happens whenever he says his human rights need to be obliged.
Yeah.
And also where he wants to make people who are victims more victimised, because that's the issue. It doesn't matter whether he's actually murdered some of these individuals. He's hurting and harming the families who are dealing with the chasm of grief that potentially he or someone else caused. And he likes opening that wound, and he likes being in the press, and he likes getting his own way.
There's no doubt, if you look at, and you're so right, you know, there's obviously some sort of kick in that manipulative, narcissistic personality. I guess my final question, you might be a bit surprised at, because there will be people, as there were with Ghislaine Maxwell, that will say, why are you doing this? Why are the media giving him the attention he craves? I've done it because I think Jo Collins is an incredibly brave woman. I think David Collins, who wrote the article, deserves huge respect. And I think the public, maybe the police, maybe the authorities need to be aware that this man's mindset is to play with people's lives. And that's why I've done it tonight. What would you say?
Well, I would fully agree with you, and also I think it's really powerful to remind people like Bellfield that no matter how he tries to manipulate us, the truth is we see straight through him. And also, should he be guilty of some of the crimes he's staking claim to, we will not let it rest until fundamentally he's brought to justice. So it's a two-way street. He may think he's controlling us, but the reality is he has no control. We're the ones in control. And the only way he's ever going to leave prison is in a box.
Emma, I love working with you, mate. You just summed up exactly what I was going to say. Emma Kenny, thank you very, very much indeed. Levi Bellfield will rot in hell for all eternity. He will never, ever come out. The only prisoner ever to be given 2 whole life sentences. What do you make of it? Is he one of those people who is so narcissistic and so manipulative that he is using the media or whatever ends to say, I did this because he wants to be the centre of attention? But I salute again his ex-partner, a woman who shared 2 kids with him, who spoke. The most telling thing about that was when she said, I used to do that. I've heard that too many times. And Levi Bellfield won't watch this. He might not hear about it. But if you are, my friend, I hope you die a very painful and sad death very soon.